Welcome to High Performance.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start as we always do. In your mind, what is high performance?
So I think that it boils down to people and relationships. I think the whole of high performance hangs off that as a core pillar. As groups of people, I think there needs to be a common purpose. People need to know what the vision of a beautiful future looks like and how they can be part of it, how they can contribute to it, and how they can write their little piece of it. And I think as individuals within a group or a team, people just need the space, the time, and the encouragement to have a go, be creative, mess up, fail, fix, master new skills. And they need the support and encouragement to do that. I don't think it's a constant state. So high performance for me is occasionally in my career, windows of alignment where there's flow and it feels good. Everyone knows their purpose and their place and there's a nice rhythm amongst the people. But the majority of your time, you're either building towards high performance or you're rebuilding. Why would you be rebuilding? Well, you've either won and you need to win again, or you've lost and you need to find a way of winning, or the context has changed or the challenge has changed. But quite a lot of time it's messy and it's not perfect and it's uncomfortable and it's difficult, and you're just building towards this sense of flow. And you can't let the outside world define whether you've been successful or not. Success belongs to you as an individual, it belongs to you as a group. It's not for other people to have an opinion on. So in terms of me trying to develop young people who might be footballers, the obvious tangible measurement would be how many debuts have you contributed towards Manchester United or wherever it is that you happen to be working. That's a pretty cold, soulless measure of success. The real measure of success has to be, are we changing lives? Are we creating experiences that are an amazing addition to childhood years? Are we changing lives forever for the better? And the byproduct of all of that is we got some debuts. Never we're trying to create debuts. You've got to have a higher existence. You've got to have a greater purpose than just the thing that you're setting out to be good at.
But what fascinates me about your role, though, Nick, is that I fundamentally agree with what you're saying, but you're delivering that message to people that really don't want to hear it. So I can imagine that, like that Michael Calvin stat that from his book Hunger in Paradise, that, 0.1% of those kids will make it as footballers, but all of them enter thinking they will. They're not entering it thinking they're going to be better human beings. They're entering it thinking they're going to be Manchester United's next centre forward. Your bosses, the owners of the club, are thinking we're pumping millions into the academy because we want the number of debuts. So how do you have that conversation that people don't really want to hear it, a team?
I think you have to understand that the wholesome approach that I take about developing the whole person and making sure that the skills that people learn along the way are transferable and will set you up for adult life. I think a lot of people hear me say those types of things and assume, what he's doing is he's setting them up for failure. So this is the safety net. If we can learn some skills and we can have a nice time and we can, become better teammates and be good at communicating, that's setting them up for in case they fail. When I look at it the other way, I think all of those skills are actually giving you a greater chance of being a success. So the greatest footballers I've ever seen are really wholesome, rounded, robust individuals who are more than just a footballer. So I think that's the first point, is that we're not going to do all this stuff in case you fail. We're doing all this stuff because it gives you a greater opportunity to succeed. But you're right, parents necessarily don't want to hear that, hey, this is really difficult and it might not work out. Parents, that's not an easy message to hear. I'm quite cool with kids being single-mindedly focused on something that they want to achieve. Who am I to tell kids not to dream? Kids do play in World Cup finals. Kids do play in Champions League finals. And if someone wants to tell me that's what they believe they're going to do, then not my place as an adult to say, you're not going to. It's for me to say, hey, amazing. I'll help you if I can. What do you think we need to do together to help you get there? But with parents, potentially you have to be a little bit more realistic about the journey here is going to be not as straightforward as perhaps you believe it's going to be. So for me, there's a lot of myths around talent. There's a lot of perceptions as to what success or the building blocks for success look like. And the reality of success and the reality of developing talent is completely different from perhaps what the common person might believe it to be.
So share some of those myths and then help us shatter them, if you will.
So I think, particularly in football, people think you've got to start really young, that it's a linear journey, that you've got to be the best player in a winning team every week, and that whatever you do has got to look as quickly as possible. It's got to look like professional football, and people are in a race to get there, and that's what it looks like. That's what most parents bring their kids to me to say, can you do that to my son,
By the
please?
way, you see it all the time. So I have a 6-year-old just got into football. I walked out into the garden with him the other day, and he walked out and he did this, and this will only work, I suppose, if you're watching on YouTube. We walk out into the garden, he's 6, didn't know anything about football like 3 weeks ago, it's a new thing, walks out in the garden and goes... For those of you that are listening to this, he crossed his chest and lifted his hands up to the sky and breathed, because he's watching professional footballers, and who does he want to be? He doesn't want to be a kid learning a process or a young boy on a journey. He wants to be Harry Kane. Or I should say Timo Pukki, because he's a Norwich fan. And that's a challenge for you, isn't it? That they see the end goal and you're trying to make them realise that actually it's the process, not the end goal.
Yeah. Everyone's in a race. They want to get there quickly, and they want it to look really professional, and they want their kids to be exposed to the same stuff that they see on the TV. Well, talent, pathways, they don't look like that. They're messy. It's important to go slow. It's important that everybody understands individual journeys to the top look completely different. For every footballer that's playing in the Premier League, there's a completely different story. Most of those journeys are full of setbacks, struggle, trying to work out complex situations to try and simplify them in your mind. It's really messy. So most parents would want to see their child be the best player in a winning team on a weekly basis. Alarm bells ring for me when I see young players who are the best team in a winning, the best player in a winning team on a weekly basis.
Why?
Because that's one of the many experiences that you need to have. So actually, where does learning take place? Learning takes place in struggle. Learning takes place in a state of challenge, right? So sometimes you've got to be in a winning team but finding it really hard, or the best player in a losing team, or you've got to see it all. I have to prepare young people for if they cross the white line at Old Trafford, nothing presents itself on their debut that they've never seen before, so they've got to know what it's like to win, to lose, to play with 10 men, to play against 10 men, to be a goal down, to be on a yellow card, to be going into extra they need to have seen all of that. So my job is to say, yes, sometimes you need to be the best player in a winning team, because you're going to build some confidence, and you're going to it's going to be really motivating for you. But sometimes I've got to make it too hard for you, and I've got to put you into a place where it goes wrong. So now we know the limit of your capabilities, and that helps us go back to the training pitch to go, now we know what we need to work on. So for me as a developer, I learn more about young people through the struggle than I do through the success. And actually, it's the struggle that helps you refine the approach you're going to take on the training pitch. So that's a hard thing to get across to parents. I just want my son to be picked every week. I want him to play. Well, no. Part of the process is to understand what it means to be a substitute.
Yeah,
you got to, because every footballer is going to not get picked at some point, so you have to have practiced that. So I've got to show you what that looks like. So it's the tension between stretch and consolidation. So for a period of time, you've got to be stretched, where you're going to find it really hard, and then I've got to make it easy again, where whatever you learn in that challenging environment, you can now express yourself and find it comfortable and gain momentum again. And now we're going to. So I call it high challenge, high support. They're the best environments. A high challenge, high support environment is one where I'm going to say, we're going to try some stuff that's really difficult. It might go wrong, but don't worry, because we're going to provide all the support you need to make sure that you're going to fail safely. What would be other examples of environments? It would be low challenge, low support. There's no challenge and I'm not helping you. It's boring. High challenge, low support, it's too hard, you're not helping me, now I'm demotivated. And we've probably all got images in our mind of being in those different types of environments. So young children need to be in positions of high challenge, high support. You're going to fail, but it's going to be okay. The difficulty for parents is you never want to see your kids fail. It's horrible. I'm a parent. You stand on touchlines or the edge of swimming pools or the side of gymnasiums. You don't want to see your kids fail. So you got to flip the narrative, because that should be really exciting. It should be really exciting to see your kids struggle, because that means we're getting somewhere. We're improving. We're making progress. But it's hard, because you want to rescue. Parents want to rescue kids from learning situations too quickly. Leave them to it.
That's your big theme, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, everywhere I look, I see helicopter parenting. Hovering around the children all the time, solving any problems at school, solving any problems with friends, smoothing the path in front of them. And then when they get to 21, they suddenly realise, oh, my child has no resilience. So they go for their first job interview and they fail the job interview. And while you're talking, it reminds me of a story. I have a friend who is a professional footballer. His son is at an academy. And he said to me today, I was absolutely furious. He went all the way to Wales and it didn't even come on. And I called the club. I said, what is the point? Taking him all the way to Wales, spending a whole day on a coach, doesn't even get on the pitch and play. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I hope you... Now I'm sitting here thinking, hold on. As long as they supported the player in the right way, then it is this high challenge, high support environment. They've challenged the player. They said, look, this may well be your life, by the way. Because if you're a footballer, there could be seasons where you travel for hours and don't play. And then when you get called upon, you need to be ready. And just in this one short conversation, it changes my outlook. So what should we all be doing as parents? Because you have quite a rigid opportunity to create this world. You've got games of football, you've got training, you've got the changing room, you've got an office, right? Whereas as parents, we've got them all over the place. We've got them at school, at home, we've got them at the meal table, we've got them in the morning when they're tired, we've got them in the evening when they're tired, we've got them at the weekend when they're excited. It's how do we as parents create the best environment, do you think, for our young people to be challenged and supported at the same time?
So in the context of sport, I think parents need to understand that the only measure of success can be, and I'm going to use a John Wooden quote. Are you familiar with John Wooden? So John Wooden, the most successful college basketball coach of all time, a man of principle, won more things than anyone but never actually talked about winning. So that goes back to where I started. He had a higher existence than winning. He was about individual development, everyone improving every day, every week, every month, everyone being a better version of themselves today than they were yesterday. And the byproduct is winning. So that's kind of a nice illustration of what I was talking about earlier in terms of the higher existence than the tangible thing that everyone thinks it is you're trying to achieve. But that's what you have to instill in your kids, is this sense, the John Wooden quote, true success is peace of mind that you did everything you could within your power to be the best of which you're capable. Because I don't know how good your kids are going to be at football. I've selected a lot of young people who have high potential, but trying to assess potential is really difficult. And sometimes where you get to will be limited by some things out of your control, your athletic ability or some things in your genetic makeup. So your only success can be to make sure that you did everything you could to be the best that you can be. So you've got to kind of try and instill that in young people. Parents have to understand that the journey's never linear. So be prepared for a world that isn't a straight line. And I think comparison it cripples parents. Comparing your child to other people's children is a no-no, because you can only ever be disappointed, right? So I got a lovely back garden. My neighbour's got a bigger one. Doesn't mean my garden's not nice, right? So if you compare to other people, there'll always be someone who's got a bit more than you, and you're left disappointed. So in terms of trying to support young people, you can only look at the individual, their journey, and the progress that they're making.
And how
never
do you
in
get young
comparison to other
people not to compare in a world where that's all we do, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or everywhere else?
So I think as a coach, the important thing is to park the team. So the team, for me, is a vehicle for individual development. I'm not interested in the team. So young people need to be part of a team, at the end of this journey, they need to be ready to play in a competitive team in the toughest league in the world. But along the way, the team isn't the thing. The individuals is the important thing. So I've got to make sure that everything we talk about with young players, with children, is around individual development. What is it you're trying to do to improve yourself? How are you going to get better? How are we doing compared to last week? The team is just the vehicle to help you practice. It isn't the be-all and the end-all. I think that's essential, that people understand that for young people, developing a team sport is actually an individual sport.
So some of the characteristics you've described here, Nick, are about personal characteristics, resilience, the ability to handle setbacks. And yet you're in an environment that prizes, again, technical expertise, who's the fastest, who's got the greatest technique. So what would you say is the ratio for you as a developer of young talent in terms of focusing on those softer skills, we'll call them, the personal characteristics, versus the harder skills that people can measure that show up on stats?
So in terms of talent identification, it's really important that we celebrate that talent looks completely different, and each individual is a nice, beautiful blend of their own unique qualities. That's important. So, ultimately, I'm looking through a lens whereby football players are a combination of game understanding, technical, tactical ability, athleticism, and character. But you don't have to be good at all those things to be a top footballer. It's a mixing deck of you can have weaknesses. It's cool. I take a strength-based approach towards looking at young people and helping young people. So what are you good at? What are your super strengths? How do we make you world class at your super strengths? And how do we hide your weaknesses? Push strengths, hide weaknesses. Why? Because it's pretty demotivating to spend a lot of time dealing with things you're really not good at. So let's spend enough time to paper over the cracks and hide those things, but let's spend the majority of our time focusing on the thing that you're outstanding at and make you world class at it. So in answer to your question, talent is a combination of all those things. As long as every individual's got an outstanding quality and a nice balance of some of those other things that kind of complement each other, the thing we're really looking for is character. Character is so I've worked with loads of young players over the years, tall ones, short ones, fast ones, slow ones, passers, dribblers, warriors, all sorts. The one thing that they all have in common is character.
So describe that, break down what character means to you.
So I used to call it warrior spirit, but I dropped the warrior because I think that has awful connotations. So we might get onto this, but I'm a big believer that in order to be the best at something, you've got to be able to show vulnerability. So if I ask you to be a warrior, I'm asking you not to show vulnerability. So I park the warrior, I just call it spirit. And what is spirit? Well, it's ability to learn. It's resilience. It's an intrinsic drive to want to get better at something, the rage to master. It's intrinsic. No parent can put that into someone. We'll talk about that in a minute. And it's a competitive fire. So it's those things. And those things, without those things, it doesn't matter how athletic you are or what techniques you've got, you're going to find it really difficult to play at the highest level. I spent a lot of time, particularly during lockdown, with lots of access to former players at United and lots of spare time on our hands, and we start to unpick.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, you joined us. We start to unpick, come on, what is it that a Manchester United player has? And the answer is, well, look, you get to the Premier League, everyone's got some athleticism, everyone's got some technique, everyone's got some game sense. The non-negotiable is character. If we go back to your earlier questions, how do you develop character? How do you develop resilience? Well, it's lots of little microdoses of finding stuff hard along the way. If I can expose you to lots of little struggles and traumas, things that are a bit too difficult, things that might go wrong, you build those qualities, you build resilience, and you build the ability to learn, and you build. So if we talk about parents who rescue too quickly, when you rescue kids from a difficult situation, you're basically saying, I'm taking that learning opportunity away from you. I'm going to solve the problem for you. Whereas if you just leave them to it, it's an amazing opportunity. So not getting picked or driving to Wales to not play, not pleasant, not nice. I wouldn't advise that someone experiences that every week. But if you experience it once, it's okay. It's a learning experience. How are we going to deal with it? What sort of conversation could you have with the coach at your next training session about the experience you've just had? If you do get on the pitch, how are you going to behave? How are you going to warm up like a world-class player? All those types of things. It's a great opportunity rather than, as you say, helicopter parents diving in, rescuing their kids from a difficult situation. When you rescue them from a difficult situation, all you're doing is depriving them of a learning experience.
So do you create the friction and the challenge for these young people, or do you just allow life in the academy at Manchester United to present those moments?
It's a little bit of both. So talent development's messy, and by coincidence, things will crop up that are unexpected that coaches and players will not be expecting, and we've got to work through it together. But actually, my job really is to create on a regular basis challenge. So playing kids up an age group, or if we've got a group of boys that are highly talented, how do I go and find a tougher opposition for them to play? Yep. How do I find a world where they're going to lose? How do I find an opportunity for you as an individual? So you're a centre forward. I've got to hunt down the best central defender for you to play against. I've got to find the defender that's better than you, because that's the only way that you're going to learn. But it's a healthy balance, because if you only ever experience challenge, it can become demotivating. Regular failure isn't very helpful. So it needs to be that healthy balance of opportunity to thrive at times and express yourself, and at other times opportunities where it's a little bit too difficult, which is what used to happen by accident when we were kids. You play in the playground, you're the best player. Play in your street, my next door neighbour's bigger than me, he's better than me. Play in the back garden, I've got an older brother, he's going to make it tough. Play for the county team, it's getting a bit tricky, and you might have one session a week with the pro club. Now it's really hard. So you naturally used to get that kind of lovely mixture of experiences and the variety of contest, the variety of challenge. A lot of that's disappeared now, hasn't it? That old structure of how sport used to look doesn't exist anymore. So we've got to recreate it. You know, I have to try and recreate that within the academy, the variety of experience, and the struggles, and the opportunity to find it easy as well.
But then, how do you deal with the time that they're not with you? Do you see what I mean? Because I think for a lot of the kids that come in, like you go up that big driveway to Carrington, you're surrounded by like opulence, if you like, and all these symbols that you've made it, you're elite, you're already well along the pathway of being successful. And then I hear that you're creating that environment where they're being challenged there. But what about when they're back home, where the family and their friends think, oh, he's a Manchester United footballer, I see him wearing the kit, I've heard that there's already agents sniffing around him. How do you give them the vitamins and the minerals to cope outside of that environment where you don't get to structure it so much?
I have to celebrate the time that they're not with us. So if you think about the terminology we use around talent systems, we create the imagery of it being a factory. So we talk about the production of players, the conveyor belt, the pipeline. And so as soon as you paint the picture of talent development is a factory setting, I make some assumptions that I'm in control. I will teach the child, I will show them, I will tell them all the information that they can ever need. I'll give it to them when I think they're ready for it, and that the only place that they can ever develop is with me in my factory. If you think about ecosystems and how animals or humans develop, you've got a human bouncing around many different environments, and from each environment they pinch a little piece of learning. Yeah, so the environment shapes the person.
Yep.
You bump into people or you face different experiences, and that shapes you. So it's an ecosystem. So I have to be brave enough to allow the kids to spend and encourage the kids to spend time away from me. So I can show you some stuff here, but if you're self-driven and if you have a dream and you're determined when you're not with me, you're going to go and bounce around you're going to go and play with your mates, you're going to play with another sport, you're going to bump into a PE teacher, you're going to hang out with your uncle or your brother, and I've got to allow the kids to bounce around the ecosystem. And really, learning has to come from the learner, not the teacher. So you've got to be self-driven. So if you think about how you guys became experts, if I were to say, who produced you? So we talk about, in football, don't we? We produced player X, Y. Well, who produced you? Well, are you going to give me the name of an organisation or the name of an individual? You're not, are you? You're going to say, how did I get where I got to? Well, I went on a course and I met an inspirational person, and I did a bit of work experience, and you just collected.
Yeah. Saw the evidence.
Different things along the way.
Yeah.
But it was you that drove it. It came from within. So that's probably goes back to talent ID. I've got to find players who are driven from within.
Yep.
And so when they're not with us at the academy, they are using that intrinsic drive to pinch information, to collaborate, to find bits of wisdom from wherever they are. But also the important thing is this can't become professional too soon. So this has to be an authentic, childlike experience. So I've got to encourage them to go and play other sports and mess around with their mates and go to birthday parties and be a normal kid, right? It can't be professional, because if it gets professional too soon, it gets boring really quickly. If it gets professional too soon, we miss out on childhood. If it gets professional too soon, we reach burnout. We've got to go slow. We've got to look like authentic childhood experiences. So when you're 9 and 10 with us, you've got to mess around, you've got to experiment, you've got to fall in love with the ball, you've got to fall in love with Man United, but you've got to try bicycle kicks, make mistakes, and you'll not find an overbearing coach instructing and fixing. And no, it's trial and error, mess around, be creative. And as we go through the journey, we'll start to add bits in, and it will look a little bit more professional, and we might introduce you to a sports scientist along the way, and there might be a nutritionist arrive, and we might talk about tactics, but you don't get all that at the beginning. And that's maybe a fault of parents sometimes, as they want all of that at the beginning of the journey.
Yep.
And we've got to go slow. My job is to hold stuff back. How do I make the journey inspirational and aspirational? How do I make sure that it remains as childlike as possible for as long as possible? Because, authentic childhood experiences actually are probably going to give you a greater chance of developing skill than a coach-led environment. But also I've got the moral obligation of mine to make sure this is as fun as possible, and it enriches your life, and you make a load of mates and you have a really good time. So it's the yin and yang of those two things.
I find the desire conversation an interesting one. So we had exactly this conversation last night, my wife and I, about trying to create more desire in Florence to do her homework. She just, it's just not there at the moment. So can we create it? Is it something that will never be there? Do we have to be patient and wait for it and allow it to find itself naturally?
I would suggest so. So I'd encourage parents to help their kids explore early on. Try as much stuff as you can and find the thing that excites you. And then maybe we can invest some time in that. Quite often with football, parents want their kids to get excited by football because it's the thing that they're excited by. So sometimes kids are playing football not because it's the thing that excites them, it's because the thing that their family is prepared to support them with. But I think it's about exploring, trying stuff out, sampling, finding the thing that excites you, because you can't put drive into someone. It has to come from within. And maybe with regards to homework and things like that, it's actually the process of dealing with the consequences of not doing your homework is the thing that teaches you that you need to do your homework. Yeah. Not a parent saying, you need to do your homework. It's the process of, well, I didn't do it, and I ended up in detention, and I missed drama club because I was in detention and my mates were all having a great time. It's the consequence. So you've got to be brave enough as parents to let your kids mess up. Let them touch the hot plate. That's the only way that you know that you shouldn't touch the hot plate is you burnt your hand, right? Yeah. You got to be, it's hard to do. And as I say, as a parent, you want to jump in quickly and solve all the problems, but you can't.
But tell us about how you get your coaches to buy into this mindset as well, Nick, because I can imagine that as a coach at Manchester United, you've got like this desire that you wouldn't be successful. You wouldn't be the guy on the touchline watching your team lift the trophy like you did recently with the FA Youth Cup. So how do you get them to buy into this idea of let's accept it's going to be messy. Let's not worry about winning the trophies. Let's go slow when we need to.
I have to treat the coaches the same as I would the players. Enough space and time to experiment and explore and do stuff that sometimes goes wrong, that you can reflect upon, refine, fix, and do it differently further down the line. So I can't. Yeah, we have some parameters and we have some ways of working that are a little bit prescriptive. We have to do these certain things, but actually I've got to allow coaches the opportunity to rack up they're practicing as well, right? The same as the players are.
Yeah.
I've got to allow them to accumulate craft knowledge, which is time on the pitch, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of interactions with kids, and work out through those interactions which ones are successful, which ones are not successful. It's how I got to where I am, is by getting it really badly wrong at the beginning. So my first ever job would have been with the 9-year-olds at Watford, and I had a team, and I genuinely thought it was a team, and I spent a lot of time on tactics, and I was trying to win at the weekends, and I was getting really excited for myself that my team was winning. And then it's not until that group of 9-year-olds are 20 that you can look back and go, oh, actually my approach, I didn't help them, because I was concentrating on the team, which meant some kids weren't playing. And the time I dedicated to tactics, I was missing out on the real fundamentals of ball mastery. But also, I learnt that, the best kid in that under-9s team, I released him, and he went on to play Premier League football. And the kid that I thought was really good, I got bored by the age of 11 and dropped out. So I had to create the wrong environment for a group of 9-year-olds in order to know how to create the right environment further down the line.
So, Eddie Jones was fascinating on this when we had him on the podcast, wasn't he? Because so we touched on this area about coaching, and he bemoaned the fact that too many schools employ coaches rather than teachers to do that, because he felt that coaches were focused on winning and the tactics and the mistakes you described with Watford under-9s, whereas teachers were invested more in the process of learning and challenging and supporting them. So what are the best tips and ideas that you can share with listeners here that maybe work with young kids, whether it's on a Sunday football team or whether it's in other activities, that actually facilitates the child's journey to their own definition of high performance?
So if you're a novice coach at the weekends, and usually you're railroaded into taking a team, aren't you? Because you've got a pair of football boots and your lad's in the team, so you end up taking it. If you don't know what you're doing, accept that you don't know what you're doing, have a match and make sure everyone gets a go. And it's as simple as that. Put the kids into as many game-like situations as you possibly can, give them loads of repetitions, let them have a go. Catch kids doing things right. I think that's so important. So don't worry about mistakes. Catch kids doing things right. Praise things that go well. Be supportive. Be encouraging. And if you're not sure what you're doing, don't try and do too much. Kids want to play football. Let them play. Drills, lots of detail, lots of information, lots of kids standing around not getting a go at stuff, lots of stand still while I show you. A waste of time. If you're not sure what you're doing, get the kids playing a game as quickly as possible. Encourage things that go well. Leave them alone. And they'll work it out.
And based on this approach of empathy and allowing mistakes and not focusing on results and being patient and understanding the young people in your charge, who do you look upon as the poster boy for what you've done and it's been successful?
As in the player that... Okay, so I think it's really important. One of my golden rules is I can never claim who I've helped develop. That's for them to decide whether I help them or not. All right? And you help different individuals in different ways. So with Jadon Sancho, I'm not so sure I ever helped him technically or tactically or athletically. But what we did do is, by chance, allowed him the opportunity to stay residentially at our training ground.
This is Watford?
Yeah, Watford. So at Watford we had a school and a training centre all on the same site, and the school had built a small boarding house, and there was 2 bedrooms dedicated to Watford, and the school said, would we kindly fund those 2 rooms? So we said yes. So now we've got 2 rooms and I don't know what to do with them. Jadon Sancho lives the furthest away, so I'm thinking that room would be quite useful to limit the amount of travel he has to do. So Jadon, I've got a room. Mum, Dad, what do you think? Jadon, do you want to stay in this room on a residential basis? And he did do. And it was by chance. And it was the thing that supported him more than anything else. Why do I make that point? Well, I make that point because every child needs something different from you. Some need some tactical help. Some need you to help them with their confidence. Some need you to buy them a pair of boots. Some need you to put a roof over their head. But at the end of the day, only they can tell you whether you were the one that helped them or not. It's not for me to decide whether I was that guy.
But I'm interested that yours and Jadon's careers have brought you to the same place now at Manchester United. So when you talk to him about that period and that decision to give him that residential space, how does he remember it? What does he say he gained from it?
He was petrified. He didn't enjoy it. He was homesick. But he knew that it was the right thing for him to do because he had a dream. And he remembers it being really hard and really difficult. And so it goes back to
The same thing we discussed at the beginning, yeah.
He didn't, but did it sow a seed in Jadon that made him brave enough to leave Watford to go to Manchester City, and brave enough to go from Manchester City to Dortmund? Maybe he had an early life experience of trying something really hard and going, it's okay. That wasn't too bad. It was difficult, but I got through it, and I can see how it has benefited me and my development. Maybe it just sowed the seed for, I'm going to be the guy that moves to Germany to propel my career. And I think that's the beauty of finding your way through adversity, is it teaches you that you can do it again, or you can face up to something that looks a little bit like that somewhere further down the line.
And I'm well aware that you've just said that you don't like to claim the credit, you allow the player to decide. But who of all the players you've worked with has given you the biggest sense of satisfaction? Either things were a real challenge, they'd had difficulties at other clubs, or there was a period where it looked like it was never going to happen, then it did.
Probably the players that you'll never have heard of, that never ever emerged as a footballer. Yeah. So my vocation in life is helping young people, and the byproduct of helping young people is some will make debuts. But I've got, and I truly believe that at the heart of coaching is connection and love. All right, in order to help someone be good at something that's really difficult, we've got to have absolute trust, have absolute connection, and there has to be love. And that you don't turn that off just because someone leaves your football club. So that love goes on. And some of my greatest kind of satisfactions are in boys that, I had a great time. The journey was amazing. I didn't become a footballer, but the stuff that I've learned, the memories I have, the connections I made have set me up for life in other walks of life. And it's the boys that you bump into in the Trafford Centre that run towards you with a smile on their face, give you great satisfaction. I use that as a measure of my success. If you're in a shopping centre and boys that you've worked with walk by and they don't want to look at you, you've not done a great job. If they smile and they want to have a chat, it means the connection is still there. So it's boys that have gone on to be teachers, boys that have gone on to be coaches, boys that have achieved away from the world of football, often as much or more satisfaction than those that are playing the Premier League.
And they're also the boys who've had to be given that difficult news that, listen, you're not going to make it as a professional footballer. What advice would you give to people for how to deliver that kind of news in the best way possible?
Feedback in general has to have 3 ingredients. It's got to be honest, it's got to be helpful, it's got to be kind. Now, ideally, what you need to be doing is giving regular doses of feedback, so the gap between the feedback doesn't mean that feedback comes as a shock. So as long as feedback is regular, honest, helpful, kind. You're not going to go too far wrong. The important thing about a boy when he reaches the end of the journey, he needs to know that he was given every opportunity to be the best he could be. He needs to be able to say, I had a go, I got lots of opportunities on the pitch, my coach was invested in me, I was given a chance to be the best I could be, and then as long as the feedback along the way is honest, helpful and kind, I think that the majority of young people that you work with appreciate that. And I think you have to be brave enough to have difficult conversations in the short term to avoid real conflict in the long term. So what's the phrase that you use? It's about dealing in short-term discomfort to avoid long-term, what's the word I'm looking for? Dysfunction.
Right.
Short-term discomfort to avoid long-term dysfunction. So I don't want to have that conversation. It's going to be really difficult. It's going to be quite challenging. We've all had it, right? Dealing with staff in PDR meetings or one-to-one. I really don't want that conversation, but I need to address an issue. I need to have the conversation that's going to be uncomfortable. I really want to avoid the discomfort of that conversation. But if you have to meet the discomfort of those conversations headlong to avoid long-term dysfunction. If it's your organisation, you miss enough of those conversations, you're going to have a dysfunctional organisation. With young people feeding back on their performance, if you shy away from the difficult conversation in the short term, you're going to create dysfunction for the individual in the long term, i.e. feeling of dissatisfaction, feeling that they were let down, a feeling that, you know...
It reminds me of that great quote about what great coaching is, isn't it? Which is troubling the comfortable and comforting the troubled.
Yeah.
It's about dealing with that discomfort
Yes,
where
absolutely.
you need it.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
I want to know whether you're swimming against the tide here, though, because when I think about academies and youth teams and football in general, you know, I think historically of very masculine environments, probably a decent bit of bullying, you know, making people stand up and sing to be part of the gang and embarrassing them until they're involved in the group. All of those sort of traditional stereotypes that we've attached to football over the years, and that's not about youth teams. That was football generally, wasn't it, 20 years ago? How many youth teams across the country are doing what Manchester United are doing, do you think?
I think the game's changed. I think that it's probably time that academies started standing up for themselves a little bit. They are amazing places that enrich people's lives with wonderful coaches doing wonderful things. Do things sometimes go wrong? Occasionally, yes. Do kids make debuts? Occasionally, yes. The majority of the kids are having amazing experiences that are changing their lives forever and for the better, and are propelling them into a world of adult life that is going to mean they're a success because of the experiences that they had. I definitely know that those types of behaviours went on many years ago.
Yep.
I think academies have been reformed in terms of the resource that we now invest, the teams of experts, psychologists, education teams, welfare teams, player care. The young people in our care now have such a robust support network of pastoral care that I truly believe that, you know, we are probably across all sports now, where there's more resource in football than in any other sport. I would argue that football is probably ahead of the curve, and I would argue as well that there's stuff that goes off at football clubs that won't happen at schools in terms of aftercare. Well, in terms of aftercare, do you remember your school ringing you up after you left? See how you were? It didn't happen, did it? Football clubs, I think, have got the amount of informal education programs that are going off, using the football as a vehicle to teach young people about social media and mental health. It's incredible, the amount of work.
Can we talk about the mental health capacity? I know Stuart Webberwell, who's the director of football at Norwich, and he asked me to go and host an event for the parents of the young players. And the message he gave out, which I thought was really smart, he said, look, you're all sitting here now believing your son is going to be the next first team player at Norwich City. All the things that make your son potentially a good footballer, the dedication, the hard work, the attention to detail, at times the obsessiveness, the sort of real deep-seated desire to make it, all of those things are also apparent in people with mental health problems. and you won't want to hear this, but there is a greater chance that your dedicated, laser-focused young man is more likely to be on a path to mental health issues than some other young people. So what do you do to keep an eye on that? How do you recognise it and how do you deal with it?
So first and foremost, it's having an awareness that the UK is one of the most unhappy places to live in Europe. Mental health issues are on the rise in young people and particularly in boys. So I know that I'm working with a cross-section of the population where there is great risk. Growing up is hard work. Park football or being associated with an academy. I'm just saying, in general, being a young man is a real challenge. So we have to have staff that are aware, and we have to have staff that are skilled in dealing with all the issues that potentially could present themselves to us. At a very first line of defence is about having all staff trained up and qualified to be able to understand what mental health first aid looks like, i.e. how can you recognise signs. But then it's about having robust systems in place to make sure that if there is any nervousness around an issue that a young person's facing, that we can make sure that we get them the right support at the right time. The biggest, you talked about swimming against the tide earlier, the biggest challenge is that sport in general, football in particular, encourages you to be brave and, puff your chest out and be macho and not show weakness. I talk about silence voices a lot. In order for my coach to pick me, I got to show him the things I think that are on his invisible checklist of things that might get me in his team, and that's probably not showing weakness, and it's about kind of being a 24/7 pro and making sacrifice. We use that type of language, right? You got to be a 24/7 pro, make sacrifices, and all those types of. So we're creating a world where we're asking kids to conform to some of that stuff. Where's the space for vulnerability? Where's the space for being an authentic version of yourself? So I think a lot of mental health issues derive from people not being able to be an authentic version of themselves. So potentially the exchange there of me getting picked for your team means I've got to present to you that I'm someone that I'm not. So in terms of swimming against the tide, I think the work that we're doing at Manchester United and that I'm really proud of is we're trying to make it normal to talk about mental health issues. We're trying to make it okay to share weakness. We're trying to make it okay to be
And how do you
vulnerable.
create that vulnerable environment?
So,
Are you vulnerable at work?
yeah, I think that's part of your role as a leader, is if you can show your own vulnerabilities and weaknesses and insecurities, then the people around you will do the same, and there's a ripple effect. So I think that's absolutely essential, that as a leader you can demonstrate.
So give us an example
vulnerability.
of that, Nick. How do you do it?
I will quite often tell my immediate staff when I don't know the solution to the challenge that we're faced with, guys, we're faced with this really difficult issue. I don't know the answers, and I'm nervous and I'm scared and I need your help. That's an okay conversation for me to have with the team around me, because I trust them. And I think if I can do that to my immediate staff, they can do that to the young people that they're then associated with. So I think that is absolutely imperative, that you have to model the behaviours that you expect everyone else in your organisation to be able to demonstrate. It's about language change at times. We've got to make sure that I mentioned briefly earlier about, I used to call it warrior spirit. I just call it spirit now, because I think the warrior gives off the wrong connotations. I'm asking you to be a gladiator, when just spirit will do. So just subtle changes of language is really important. And then there's some more overt stuff. So we've recently had a month of mental health awareness, which is where staff, players, parents, other clubs, we just got together and engaged in a month of activities that encouraged us all to talk, share, explore, listen to people's stories, look at some of our role and what's emerging. I was about to say what's wonderful. It's not wonderful, but the repercussions are wonderful, as we're seeing some iconic performers who've achieved wonderful things retrospectively share with us some of the turmoil that they were going through. And I think that helps young people to, role model and understand that it's okay to struggle.
So I saw that recently you had Harry Maguire take on the role of being like the champion for mental health with the academy. What sort of messages is he giving to those young players then?
He will have given our boys a lot of the sort of messages that I've given today. And his journey was a typical journey. So I think that a lot of parents and young people are wired up to want to be the exception to the rule. So Marcus Rashford is the exception to the rule. Superstar at 9, superstar at 19, make your debut, score some goals, stay in the team, play for your country. Everyone's trying to follow in his footsteps, but it's inappropriate to think that that's the common route to success. Actually, Harry Maguire's journey is the common journey, and perhaps the one that we all need to, and not just Harry Maguire. I often look at the England squad. If you look at any starting 11, you start to unravel all the journeys. They're fascinating. There's kids that have been released from football clubs and emerged somewhere else. There's lads that have come through non-league football. There's boys that have, not been picked early on in their careers and have had to not make their debuts till they're 22. So Harry would have just shared his experiences, his own personal journey, and from that, boys can start to identify and role model.
So in your career, Nick, you mentioned you started at Watford and Graham Taylor was the manager at the time when you were there, and then you went to Sheffield United before moving across to Manchester United. So you've served under lots of head coaches in your career. Who have been the best ones at creating that transition from your work with those young players into then helping them make that transition into senior football? And what is it they did?
I was really lucky to work with some amazing folk. I think luck plays a big part in success. You've got to make your luck, but it has to come your way. So at Watford, I was privileged. Graham Taylor, Aidy Boothroyd, Sean Dyche, Malcolm Mackay, Brendan Rodgers. I was surrounded by experts, and so on a daily basis, I was uncomfortable because when you're surrounded by people who are really good, who you're in awe of, you've got to be on your game, haven't you, on a daily basis. So that was an amazing learning experience for me. Sean Dyche, I would suggest, as a youth team coach at Watford, was one of the best youth team coaches I've worked with. Why? Well, I suspect, and he never articulated it, but I suspect he knew he was preparing himself to be a manager, but he never let that show. He was wholeheartedly dedicated to development of young people and never put his own personal journey ahead of the individual's journey, which I think is a real quality. For him to know that I'm on a journey and I want to develop some skills and I've got my own aspirations and desires, but at no point did he ever put his ego ahead of what the young people were doing. What did he do for those boys in that youth team? I suggest what he did was paint a wonderful picture of what the next bit looks like, because he only just finished playing. So he was great at articulating the next bit's going to look like this, and therefore I'm going to help you shape some skills that are going to prepare you for the next bit. He was outstanding in terms of, but he was all the things I was talking about. He gave boys opportunity. He didn't pick the same 11 every week. You're playing in FA Youth Cup games and he knew it was his duty to make sure he got as many of them on the pitch as possible, because playing in the FA Youth Cup either will prepare you for a career in football, but if it doesn't, it's going to be an amazing memory that you'll take with you for the rest of your life. So he approached the job with all of the morals that potentially he shared with you when you spoke to him a while back.
Yep.
Yeah,
Brilliant. We've reached the point of our quickfire questions. So we always start with the 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and the people around you need to buy into. What have you got for us?
And can I indulge myself here? Have a few more and also talk about the process of how I get there. So at Manchester United right now, we've got 5 non-negotiables. Now, the importance of the 5 non-negotiables is I didn't create them. So I think there's lots of non-negotiables in terms of, you've got to work hard, and I want you to be respectful. And do you know what? That gets boxed off in terms of appointing good members of staff. You go through that bit there. And there's lots of negotiables in terms of how many hours you need to work and what's your job description. That gets boxed off by the HR department. In terms of high performance, if you've got a group of people together, no point me giving you the non-negotiables. You've got to work them out for yourself, because then you'll police them and you'll own them and they'll be yours and you'll protect them with your life. So at Manchester United, we spent a lot of time with the staff, with the players, workshopping what behaviours are important, what values are important to you. And we came up with 5 words that spell out, is it an acronym? Spell out the word baton. Mm-hmm. We're carrying the baton of Jimmy Murphy from...
Brilliant.
All right. So I have
He's Matt Busby's assistant.
Forefathers of youth development. Go back to Munich. Matt Busby handed on the baton. So BATON. We've got to be brave. We've got to be adaptable, together, optimistic, and the N stood for nobody else but us, and no other time but now. So that's the whole concept that a lot of people can moan that, I don't like the culture of this place. You have to accept that you are the culture.
Brilliant.
So we have to remind ourselves, nobody else but us, and no other time but now. If we don't like the culture, it's for us to own it and fix it.
Love that.
So are they your 5 as well?
I think your non-negotiables changed based on the people, your organisation, and the task at hand. So right now they are, and I have to live and breathe those. Were they different at Watford? Were they different at Sheffield United? Absolutely. But you've got to know your organisation. You've got to know what it is you're trying to achieve, and you've got to know the task at hand. So yeah, I have to live and breathe those 5.
If you could go back to one moment in your life, what would it be and why?
I've got a short memory. I'll go back 2 weeks to an FA Youth Cup final. So under 18s, played at Old Trafford, FA Youth Cup final. The FA Youth Cup final has great history. Manchester United have won it more than anyone else. They won the first 5. Duncan Edwards, Bobby Charlton, George Best have all lifted that trophy, class of 92. We haven't won it since 2011. That group of boys managed to win it, the class of 22. But it wasn't the victory. It was the fact that it was a beautiful byproduct of a season's worth of individuals improving, and then the backdrop of 67,000 fans turned up, which reminds us that youth is at the centre of everything Manchester United does. Youth saw, or has seen, Manchester United through its darkest days and its greatest days. So youth got us through Munich, and youth is what's seen us win Champions League. So it was a nice reminder that the local people, 67,000 people, wanted to turn up to see the youth of the day, and it was an amazing event. And no other club could have put on a night like that in terms of a record crowd, and I don't think it will ever be seen again.
What advice would you give that teenage Nick, the lad with the dream, just starting out?
So there's 3 things I work on. One is daring greatly, and I think I'm quite good at that. So it's being brave to stick yourself in the arena. The other is connection. I'm okay at that. I'm trying to get better. But I think a lot of high-performing people are perfectionists, and they strive often for the impossible, and we forget to be kind to ourselves. And I think it's so important that you have to stop, be kind to yourself, and celebrate small wins. And so the advice I would give to myself would simply be, keep going, you're doing all right, it's going to be okay, well done.
Nice. And finally, your kind of last message really for people that have listened to this brilliant episode of High Performance, your one golden rule for living a high performance life.
Find the thing that excites you and go for it in a wholehearted fashion.
Love it. Listen, such a great conversation for parents of children who are obsessed with football, and both my son and daughter dream about it all the time. I listen to you talk, and I watch the way that you have that fire in your eyes when not when you're talking about football or football results, but when you're talking about young people. And I look at it and think, I'd be perfectly happy for my kids to be under your care at Manchester United. So Really interesting.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a conversation we had with Rob Baxter, the Exeter Chiefs coach, who asked the question during his first 5 years as a coach, would I be happy for my children to come and work in this environment? And he was very honest to say, first 5 years he'd have answered no. But the self-awareness changed his whole coaching approach. And he said until he could get to a place where he would be happy to answer that. And I think the best compliment I can pay you, Nick, is that I'd be happy for my children to come into the environment that you oversee. And I can't pay a higher testimony to you than that.
Thank you.
Top man. Send any good kids Norwich City's way.